I'm having a hard time getting motivated to do any work. The weather is just fun. Of course, we had a couple weeks of cold weather, bitter cold weather. Got down to 5 degrees or so, and I couldn't get the shop or the basement warmed up. It was too cold to do anything outside. And then it warmed up, but it started pouring down rain. Now that's not too bad, because that's actually kind of nice, because snow is getting melted off the roads and stuff. The ice that was built up on the roads is getting melted off, and so it's a lot easier to get around. And at least it's getting cleaned up and it going away. It wasn't so bad. But the last couple of days we've had winter storms here. Yesterday it blew 45 miles an hour, and we got a couple inches of rain over a couple of days. And then today it was blowing 60 miles an hour, and well, overnight we got a little bit of snow. It turned into slush, so we had about an inch of real soupy, sloppy snow on the ground. And then the wind was blowing about 40, 50, up to 60 miles an hour. Plus the clouds are real thick and it's dark out, even though we are getting a little bit more sunshine now. The sun's coming up 8 o'clock in the morning and not going down until just after 4. But it is dark with all the thick clouds and stuff. So, like I said, it's hard to get motivated. Since I can't really, or don't really want to do anything outside, I have done a couple of little projects here. But I decided to go ahead and do this one, and it's something I wasn't going to do because I wanted to concentrate on doing stuff that contributed towards working on the house and getting production done. And this is not necessarily contributing to that. It's something that needs to be done, and that's work on this quick change gearbox on the lathe. I've been running the lathe without it, and I can get by without it. It is nice to have it when you're running a long piece or something, but I haven't done anything that I've really needed that with. I would like to get into learning how to single point thread, and I need it for doing that. But since the weather's not cooperating, everything's the way it is, I might as well get this done. This is the change gears here. This is the change mechanism for changing the gears in it, and it has gears on there that engage with all these other gears in the gearbox, and the shaft that those go on was bent, and it was bent pretty good, so those things would pop out. And as I got to investigating it further, there's a couple of gears here, and when I would rotate those through a certain point, they would bind up a little bit. So I went ahead and ordered all new shafts for this, and then of course I took everything all apart and inspected everything. Nothing else was damaged, no gears or anything were damaged or anything like that, but these shafts, this one shaft was definitely bent, and I suspected one of the other shafts was bent, so I just ordered 3 new shafts for it. First 2 came fairly quickly. The third one was on back order from Grizzly, and I finally got it. And then it's all just been sitting there in a pile because I didn't want to take the time to deal with it. Well, now I've got time, so I've got everything laid out here, and I'm trying to remember how everything goes back together, and I think I've just about got it figured out. I'd video all of this before when I was taking it apart, so I was going up and reviewing the videos on that, and I did figure out the one thing that I had missed, and that was where this snap ring goes. And it turns out this snap ring goes on this shaft here. I thought, you can see this shaft here, that where the handles go has grooves on it, and I thought it went on there maybe, and there was only one snap ring, so I thought maybe I'd lost a snap ring, but it doesn't. It goes on actually this screw right here, and it goes right there. There's the groove for the snap ring right there. This one gear here needs a key in it, and I've lost the key for that, so I'll have to make a new key for that. And this one just turns freely on a bushing, so this one turns with this. So I've got everything pretty well figured out. As I slip in these gears on the new shafts, I got them all on there and got everything dry assembled, but the shafts are kind of rough. Everything's rough on there, so I'm going to take some time now and polish stuff up. I'm going to take these new shafts. I think I'll just go ahead and put them in the lathe and polish the shafts up a little bit with some 1000. I've got some 1000 grit wet and dry sandpaper, and anyway, polish those up so everything is supposed to slide on them slides better, and check everything out. I know it'll wear in anyway, but while it does, things get stiff on it, and it's hard to move things around. So I might as well. I've got stuff slides like on this one key here. This whole rack of gears there slides on that, and then well, this gear here is the one that moves back and forth to engage either the feed screw or the lead screw, depending on which one you want it to run. And that one's a little sticky on that. So anyway, I think I'll stone this stuff. We'll get some fine stones. I'll go ahead and polish some of this stuff up and get it so everything works a little better before I put it together. I got these new shafts all polished up. I just put them on the lathe, put some oil on them, and hit them with some 1000 grit sandpaper. And then I got some 400 grit sandpaper and put on a popsicle stick and used it to get in here and clean up these keyways. Then I took the keys and polished them up because they didn't fit very good in the keyways. This key here in this gear, this is the gear that gets switched back and forth between the feed screw and the feed rod, and it has a key here that's pinned on it, and that pin stuck up a little bit, so that drug on that shaft anyway, that goes right in here. So that's cleaned up. So I polished up all the keys so they slide easier, checked out all the gears, and they actually look all pretty good. So now I gotta give myself a clean working surface and get everything washed down again, and then start lubing it up and putting it back together. I'm getting this gearbox back together. I took this feed screw shaft out, cleaned it up, and then put assembly lube on the thrust bearings on there, put it back in, and tightened it down, and that works a lot smoother now than it did. I also put assembly lube down in on this shifter that shifts this bearing, or this gear back and forth between the feed screw and the lead screw. Anyway, I put this shaft in here for this change gears, and that's got this gear that shifts back and forth between the lead screw and the feed screw on a large diameter portion of the shaft. And then it's got all the change gears in here, and then it's got the drive gears. I'm not sure exactly how these work, but these are the gears that come off. This is the main drive here that comes from the drive gear off the back, the main shaft off the back of the lathe. So anyway, I put this shaft in and then started to put this smaller shaft in, the main drive shaft in, and it screwed up. There's a key, just one key underneath this one gear right here, or this one set of gears. It's two gears. It's a 16 and a 32, and then this other 16 and 32 is a floater. It's an idler gear. It just spins on that shaft. Well, where that keyway is, you've got to have room behind the gear to slide this shaft in there, put the key in there in the keyway, and then slide the gear on there, and you can't do that if these other gears are on there. So I had to take this shaft out, these gears out, and push this shaft back here to where I could get these gears fitted in there, and then put these gears back on this shaft, which was fine, except that this long shaft has it's got a screw on this end to hold it in on this end, and this at this end has a plug on it, and I'd already put the plug in there, and I put a little bit of Loctite around sleeve retainer around that plug to help hold it in there. So I had to knock that out, had to take and I had some Loctite on this screw on this end. So you said it hadn't set up or anything, so it wasn't that big of a deal, but it was kind of a pain. So we've got to run this main drive shaft in there first with these gears on it before you put the change gear shaft on it. And then there's a circlip here on this shaft. Of course, you got to put that on there and then slide the shaft in too. So anyway, that one's kind of a pain in the butt to get, but that's in there now. So the next thing to do, I've got this other, the feed screw drive to put in there. I've got to clean it up and assemble it and put it in, and then the change gear handles, the the handles for the change gears themselves that change it. That shaft has got to go in there, and then there's bearings that go in these holes right here. So that one I had to have a puller to pull the bearings off the shaft, and we'll see how that goes getting it back together. My computer set up over there, and I downloaded, well, I took videos of it when I took the thing apart, and I just copied those onto a thumb drive and then brought them off my big computer down here, or here to the basement, so that I can watch that and kind of keep an eye on what's going on there. Well, when I took it apart, everything in here, the gears and stuff, looked like they were fine. I couldn't see any obvious damage in there. I was looking for signs of any stripped teeth or any more bent gears or anything like that, and I didn't see anything. But I decided to go ahead and take it apart and inspect it to make sure, or to see what I could find. Well, as I was taking it apart, like I said, everything looked like it was pretty good, but when I turned this input shaft, I think I figured I had 7 turns on that. There it is. 7 turns on that, and it starts binding up. So I figured that this shaft here might have been bent too, or maybe this one up here. So I went ahead and disassembled the whole thing and ordered new shafts for it. Well, I've got the new shaft. I started putting everything back together. I've got it all back together, but as I got to fooling with this, I noticed that when it comes up to one point on there, it's still binding up. And that's with a brand new shaft in there. I know that shaft is straight, so I know that's not what the problem is. And all the gears look like they're in good shape, so I'm not sure what's going on there. I'm going to have to investigate that further. The most logical thing I can think of is that one of these gears, or maybe multiples of these gears, are not drilled square. The hole is not concentric with the outer portion of the gears. So I've got to do some investigating on this and see what I can figure out on that, which means that I'm probably going to have to take this whole thing apart again, because these these gears right here on this input shaft, to take them out, you've got to take these gears on this gear train out of there. Alright, by using trial and error, I figured out what was wrong with this thing, why it wasn't spinning properly. I took these first 2 gears off and left the one gear on that would mesh in with this 16 gear here. The 32 tooth gear meshes with that 16 tooth gear, and I run that as the first one, and I just spun it around, and that was binding up. And as I got to looking, I know you probably can't see it, but you just barely make it out with the naked eye, but there's 3 teeth on here that were binding up, and these teeth are not milled properly. There's not as much gap between these teeth. There's like 2/10 of an inch in the top of that one, and then there's only, there's less between the top of that one, and then you got 2/10 even between the top of that one, and the gullet down in between these are narrower. Well, that tooth is misshapen on the top, and so the other tooth that it was going in, the 16 tooth gear, wouldn't, the tooth wouldn't mesh in there properly with that and slide in on it. The teeth are shaped the wrong direction, pointed the wrong direction. That one's 2. It was binding up on that one too, but that tooth is kind of pointed, instead of being off in the radius, the radial of the center line of that, it's canted off just a little bit. So that's my problem there, is with that gear. Well, I didn't have to take any exotic measurement tools. I thought about putting a dial indicator on there with a big foot on and turning and seeing if these were running concentric and whatnot, but just put it on there one at a time and run it through until it bound up, and that was easier to do because these were both free spinning gears on there. They're floating gears on there, so they could spin by hand pretty easy. So this, as it goes around here, you've got the 16 tooth gear here turning the 32 tooth gear, and then the 16 tooth gear here turning this 32 tooth gear, and then this 16 tooth gear here turning this 32 tooth gear. So that's why it took 7 times around before it get into the binding spots on there. I'm going to see if I can dress that up a little bit with a file and maybe call Grizzly and get the part number on that and see if I can get a new gear coming from Grizzly. Meanwhile, I'm going to go ahead and take a file and see if I can true those teeth up a little bit and dress those up a little bit and see if I can get that one to working. I had identified 3 teeth as being the problems on here, so I took that off and worked on it a little bit, worked on those teeth a little bit, put it back on, and I got one of them cleaned up okay. It runs through there fairly smooth now. There's still a little bit of a hang up, but not near like it was. But this other one, it just binds up in there too hard. That tooth is just misshapen. It just was ground wrong or something, or cut wrong I should say, not ground. So I put these other gears on there and checked them all out to make sure that that wasn't any other problem on there, and you can see this one here runs just perfectly smooth on there, no problem at all. And I put it on the different positions. I put it on this position over here that's a driven position, and it worked fine. I put that little gear that goes on there in, and they all worked fine. And so like I said, I moved that one over into the place where I was having the trouble, where the one that was on there that was hanging up, and that one turns as smooth as silk there. So that's the problem, and I filed that gear tooth down a little bit and cleaned it up and shaped it up, and I could do some more on it, but I think I'm just going to go ahead and order the new gear for that. Well, I'm probably being too hard on Grizzly for the machining on that gear. That thing crashed hard enough that it bent that shaft that those handles went on, and it bent that shaft pretty good. So it's entirely feasible that when that happened there was enough pressure on there to distort those teeth in that one spot. It's just a wonder that they didn't shear them off, and that's what I was looking for when I took it apart, was sheared teeth. But with that one binding up, it's very likely, not only possible but probable, that that's what caused the damage to that, is that crash on there, distorting those teeth. So you can see a couple of teeth on there that are turned the wrong way, that are pointed off from the radial of the circle there. So that's most likely what happened. Alright, gotta go. Dogs are saying it's time to go for a walk.